Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our latest webinar. We're just going to give a few minutes just to let everybody join. So hope you're all sitting comfortably, and we'll get started in just a minute or two. Okay, so I think that probably has allowed everyone enough time to join. So good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for taking the time out on a Friday afternoon to listen to what we have to say. Today's topic is really just going to be challenging the status quo and asking the industry to reconsider MDF. We'll be given some facts around the grade of MDF that Multipanel is now based on. And hopefully you'll learn a thing or two, and then it'll be useful in what you do day to day. But I suppose a bit of background as to the topic today. It all came about from 2022 when we made the core change during the summer months. We'll talk about the reasons for that. And towards the end of the year, we just surveyed our merchant partners to just get a feel for how well the message had landed. And the feedback quite overwhelmingly was that the information was very well received with our merchant partner customers, but in terms of their customers, i.e. you, the trade, perhaps there weren't the tools or the mechanism just to be able to convey that message clearly. So we've listened to that and come up with this webinar, which hopefully you'll find really informative. So the aim of today is just really to clarify the difference between exterior grade MDF, which is now the core material of Multipanel, and other grades of MDF, standard and moisture resistant, as well as comparing them to birch plywood, and then bringing that to context of what it means in terms of multi-panel production and multi-panel installation. So running order is as we see here. We'll introduce ourselves, multi-panel, and the product. We'll then talk a little bit about why we switched and get into the technical aspects of exterior MDF. At that point, we'll pause and just take some questions. So on the bottom right of your screen, you'll see the little questions tab. So if we can ask you to post questions in there rather than in the chat, we'll pick them up and respond to those about sections 3 and 4 there. Then we'll move on to the advantages section, of which there are 5 subsections. We'll pause at the end of that and pick up any questions relating to those, and then we'll finish with a summary and an open Q&A. But for a Friday afternoon after a long week, I thought we'll maybe just start with something a little interactive. So next to the questions on the bottom right, there's a poll. So if you're able to click the poll tab, there's a question there just around level of understanding of exterior grade MDF. So it'd be good to just get a flavour for understanding in the room. If you're able to have a look and submit your vote, that would be great. So from the votes coming in so far, a bit of a mixed bag, but the majority have limited knowledge or understanding on exterior grade MDF. So hopefully what we've got to tell you will be of real value throughout the session today. So moving on, some introductions. I'm Michael, Director of Key Accounts. So I've been with Grant Westfield 17 years now in various roles, and I've seen a lot of change and transformation in our business. Most of that's been driven from inside to support continued growth. But of course, some transformation is as a response to external factors, and this core change certainly falls into that category. So we'll talk about how we've managed that change. So joining me on the webinar today is John.
Good afternoon, everybody.
John's our sales director and has been in the sort of panel industry for some time as well. Also within one of our laminate suppliers before joining Multipanel. So John will pick up on some of the sections today as well. So just to kick off, I guess most people are on this webinar know about us, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But I suppose to kick off, I've mentioned that I worked at Grant Westfield for 17 years, and we talk about Multipanel. So to cover that one off, the organisation is Grant Westfield. We've been around for 140 years. And we at Grant Westfield manufacture Multipanel, the market-leading bathroom wall panel. We started to make that in 2003. Prior to that, we've been in shop fitting and the production of commercial washroom interior systems, laboratory furniture. It's always an emphasis on manufacturing to high specifications. We're based in Edinburgh, which is where we manufacture. We've got 10 depots around the UK. Ensuring that we can deliver, up to about 600 orders a day in less than 3-day lead time. That's in the UK. We also have a distribution warehouse over on the German and Dutch border, which is a growth region for us as well. So then we start to get on to some values that shape kind of who we are as an organization, and sustainability and environmental credentials are really right at the top there. So with Multipanel, we have full FSC chain of custody. So there's absolute assurance in responsible sourcing and production there. We're a member of Made in Britain, which extends beyond the fact that we actually manufacture in Britain to employing people around the country in our depots and in sales, but it extends to our supply chain as well, and that will be a key theme that recurs throughout this webinar today. That the vast majority of raw material that makes up Multipanel comes from the UK and Ireland, thus reducing carbon footprint. We stand by quality, and we'll talk about that throughout the deck this afternoon, but we stand by that with our 30-year warranty covering the product, and then we've got people supporting all over the country, either in field sales, or we've invested in new roles of customer support specialists to support our merchant partners, but also enable the team out on the field to be supporting our customers the best way they can. So continually investing in the best product and service in the market. So when we talk about the product, a nice headline is that over 1 million square meters of it was installed last year in 2022. Wall paneling is a disruptor to the tile market, certainly, but probably most people wouldn't have expected it to be disrupting to that extent that the market leaders have done over 1 million square meters in a year. What that means in panels is we make about 9,000 to 10,000 sheets a week, every week here in Edinburgh. And that breaks down into 5 sub-ranges. So from entry level, that's really competitively priced, the likes of your whites, your frost whites, your blizzard. So for contract work, where we certainly have the offering there. Then we go up to classic premier. Neutrals is the next up, that was launched during the pandemic to complement some of the more bold feature panels that are in the next level up in Linda Barker, which was a key partnership for us that started in 2018, and has really helped to maybe overcome some previous perceptions around what wall paneling is. And then last summer we introduced the tile collection, etching the top layer of the laminate out to reveal a layer of some what looks like grout underneath, but continues to perform like a wall panel. So those are the 5 subsections, all of which are manufactured to the same specification, all have 30-year warranty, all FSC certified, all have our market-leading Hydrolock joint with a 6mm tolerance for fitting over uneven surfaces, and are all fully recyclable. So that kind of shapes us as an organisation, our values, and what makes Multipanel market leading at a glance. And at this stage, I'm going to hand over to John, who's going to talk about some of the reasons that we've made the switch in core material.
Thanks, Michael. Hello, everybody again. So just going to talk through what drove the change and what we were looking for during that process. So why did we change a long-established product specification? Well, primarily it was for ethical reasons, with the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which directly reduced the availability of birch plywood in the market in the UK. So birch plywood was around 85% manufactured in Russia. A big chunk of our supply chain was coming from the Russian market. And due to the number of panels that we need to manufacture multi-panel, as Michael says, we're making kind of 9,000 to 10,000 per week. We were unable to source the quantity required to give us security of supply. So that prompted us to look to alternatives. So what materials could replace birch plywood? And during that process, we tested a wide number of alternative timber cores, including spruce plywood, poplar plywood, tropical plywoods, different grades of MDF. And we went through a rigorous process to identify which product would give us an equivalent to birch plywood. And that was really important for us. We didn't want to sacrifice on the product quality that has really been the cornerstone of Grant Westfield for over 140 years. So during that entire search, we looked at the alternative cores and said, well, where can we find the most sustainable option? Where do we find a product which has the right levels of product quality and specification? And equally at the same time, is there a possibility of becoming more sustainable and enjoying some benefits from making the change? So during that search, we found that the Exterior Grade MDF that we selected performed the best, and by best I mean had the flattest end product, had the best consistency of density for the Hydrolock joint, and equally due to the location of the supplier, Medite, being in the Republic of Ireland, we were able to enjoy both security of supply, but equally reduced transport miles on the product. So we were able to solve what was a really worrying problem for us in terms of the reduction in the availability of birch plywood with what we believe is an equivalent material, but with some benefits to us in terms of security of supply and overall sustainability. So what is exterior grade MDF? So exterior grade MDF, as it says, is a grade of medium density fiber board that a lot of people will have come across. It's in probably nearly in every room in the house and different types of furniture. But it's important to recognize the differences in the grades that are available, and also the differences between manufacturers and the raw materials that are used. So with our particular grade of engineered timber core, it is a really dense product with a really good consistency, and which was vital for the hydrolock joint. But when we look at MDF, we have standard grade MDF, which you'll typically see in your sort of entry level furniture. There's a moisture resistant MDF and MR MDF, and this is quite commonly used in the shower panel sector. This is identified with its green dye that is put through the product. Then there's exterior grade MDF, which is kind of at the top of the chain of MDFs. And the exterior grade is, as it says on the tin, a product which is designed to be used outside. So that is a product which has got the durability to withstand big changes in temperature, changes in moisture, and is effectively a product which is perfectly suited for use in the bathroom and in wet environments. And this is there's a lot of certification and testing that Medite have done to prove that. But it is important to note that while this is called exterior grade MDF and is suitable for these environments, that is when it is properly sealed. So just like a shower panel installation, if you were installing exterior grade outside, it would be finished with paint, or it would have the edges would be covered. Just like when you're installing shower panels, you do need to seal them. And that's the same whether it's MDF, whether it's plywood, whether it's a composite core. This is one thing that's come up quite a lot in questions from installers around, well, I wouldn't use MDF in a bathroom. Well, an MDF product or a plywood product would behave in very similar ways when water, if they're not sealed correctly. And equally, a composite material, if that wasn't sealed correctly, while the panel itself may not exhibit any signs of moisture ingress, the homeowner is likely to have a nasty surprise once over time, when the water builds up behind the wall in the bathroom, and may result in damage to the kitchen ceiling or damage to the walls or into the sort of interior of the house. So all shower panel products need to be installed in line with the guidelines and need to be sealed correctly. The key thing with exterior grade MDF is it does have a good level of moisture resistance, so it's not going to blow on first sight. It's really well spec'd to be to handle the installation process. And I'll come on the next slide to have a look at some testing that we did between the different grades and how they perform, to just demonstrate that the differences between exterior grade and MR and birch plywood. The product itself can be identified by a very subtle kind of grey colouring that's on the edge. So the product isn't kind of grey like MR is green, but where you'll be able to see there is kind of a hint of the grey colouring that runs through, and that identifies it visually as exterior grade MDF. So just to kind of recap on the specification of exterior grade, it does meet Class D of the British Standard for durability, which then means that it is suitable to be used in areas of running water, again with that caveat that when it's sealed correctly. And what that really means is it can handle the change in temperature and change in humidity, so the board doesn't bend and bow and pop off the wall. It stays very flat. Our factory team and our production team have been delighted with the change to the material, because MDF is by its nature a flatter product than birch plywood. So birch plywood, with it being a natural veneer build-up product, did have a lot of variation in it, could twist, could have knots, did pose challenges to production, whereas MDF is giving us a really nice consistent flat base to laminate and then create multi-panel. One of the key differences between exterior grade and MR comes in the resins that are used, and that's what gives the difference in the property. So exterior grade MDF has no added formaldehyde, So that means there's nothing in the product outside of the natural sort of oils of the timber that have formaldehyde in. But going back to the 80s and early 90s, there was a concern around the level of formaldehyde in MDF. That's something that's not applicable at all to this grade because it doesn't have any phenolic resins in there that would contain formaldehyde. So that really does stand exterior grade out from the rest of the grades of MDF, and also makes it a nice, safe product to process in the factory and also cut on site. If you look at the tests that were ran and some of the facts about the products, so the density of exterior grade MDF is higher than both birch plywood and MR MDF, and in density, while it adds a little bit of weight to the product. So we're looking at around 1 kilo per 8x4 sheet heavier for exterior grade MDF. The density was really important for us to get a really consistent finish on the hydrolock joint. So while the product is denser, there is one thing that there is a slight downside to exterior grade MDF versus plywood, and that's in the overall hardness of the product. So exterior grade MDF is a little bit softer, so it does need to be handled with a little bit more care than birch plywood. But equally, the density of it means that we can produce a really clean, accurate cut on the product in a really good joint. The internal bond performance, so this is how much force do I need to put on this product for it to fail. So 1.4 newtons per millimeter squared. What that means in practice is you would have to apply a force of around 2 stone onto 1 centimeter squared to cause a failure in the product. And you can see that exterior grade MDF is significantly stronger than MR, but it's not that far away from plywood in terms of the strength. And you're probably sitting there thinking, well, how often is somebody going to try and rip a panel off the wall? But it's more just to give you a sense of the strength of the product pre-bonding. Then when it says there the break failure type, so when that product does fail, it's in the core of the board and it splits. The swelling after 24 hours. So for this test, samples of the product were left in a water bath for 24 hours, and we took a look at the thickness difference as a percentage over that time. So the exterior grade product performed very similarly to plywood in terms of the thickness difference. So it was just 0.3% different. So 0.3% overall, but if you look at that as a difference, it's probably around a 5% difference in that extreme test. You can see it's significantly better than MR in terms of its moisture resistance. And just picking up on that formaldehyde emission, you can see there that there's less than 1/4 of the formaldehyde emitted between the exterior grade and the MR MDF. And while for the plywood we don't have the test on the same scale, we know from experience and from our own use of plywood, the resins which are used to glue together the veneers of plywood contain formaldehyde in a similar level to our MR MDF. So overall, with the exception of the slightly softer product, we feel that exterior grade MDF does deliver us a fantastic core material for the use in shower panel products. So we're going to stop here just before we get onto the advantages and just see if there are any questions that have been asked by the group. I can see there's a few popping up there.
So yeah, first one there is, would we recommend the multi-panel bathroom seal kit, and does it need to be used in every installation?
While we do recommend it, it doesn't need, it's not to say that you can't, start again. It's a great kit to use, but it doesn't have to be used. So it's really down to an aesthetic, what the customer likes to see. So as long as you leave a 3 mm gap at the bottom of a panel, you can panel straight down to the bath or the shower and then seal there. So you don't need to use the bathroom seal kit. It doesn't invalidate the warranty if you don't use it, and it's purely down to the customer's choice. The key thing is the panel is sealed correctly.
Great. And there was another one about the difference in weight, but I think you touched on that one, John, that exterior MDF is just slightly heavier than ply given the increased density.
Yes, we're looking at around 4 or 5%. So on a 8x4 sheet, that's around 1 kilo. Great. Well, please feel free to put any more questions into the pot as we go through the presentation. We're going to hand back over now to Michael, who's going to talk through the advantages of exterior grade MDF.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so as I mentioned at the start, there will be this section split into 5 advantages. So we'll talk about sustainable sourcing, environmental impact, durability, strength, and overall quality. So starting with sustainability, I mentioned its core value in Grant Westfield, and we hold FSC chain of custody. So in sourcing an equivalent, an alternative to the birch plywood that we've used for years, ensuring that the partner had FSC chain of custody was absolutely paramount. So exterior grade MDF from Medite absolutely allows that chain to continue. But the sustainable sourcing extends beyond the FSC chain of custody to actually how it's manufactured. And some 60% recycled product goes into the makeup of exterior MDF, with the remaining as wood chip. So we're currently just finalising our own EPD, environmental product declaration, for Multipanel as a finished product. But if you do want to know more about the environmental credentials of the core, there is one for exterior MDF as well. And what that confirms is it's one of the most environmentally efficient building materials on the market. Wrapping all of that up in terms of the sustainable sourcing of this core material into the finished product of Multipanel and how we operate as a business, pleased to confirm that we've achieved ISO 14001, and that will be formalised over the coming weeks and months, which is around our environmental management system. So in summary to that element, the switch to Medite exterior absolutely supports our direction of travel from a sustainability perspective. Linking closely to that is environmental impact, and obviously a key factor of that I mentioned earlier, that the product's made in Britain, and as far as possible we look to source raw materials as closely as possible to home. With birch plywood, it wasn't all that close to home, or it couldn't be. The closest to the UK would be Finland for the quality of FSC certified birch. But the reality is that, as John mentioned, that 85% of the global supply of birch plywood came from Russia. Further afield than that, tropical plywood is in around the Far East. So there's a lot of distance to be covered actually for getting plywood into a factory in the UK, whereas we're sourcing Medite from Ireland. So it continues to reduce the overall carbon footprint of the finished Multipanel product. And then John touched on the resin. Rather than the resin that contains formaldehyde that's used on standard grade and MR grade MDF, the MDI resin is a man-made resin that has no added formaldehyde. So the finished product is actually delivers a cleaner and safer cut in terms of formaldehyde emissions and reducing environmental impact. So then John touched on the technical aspects of the density, and the fact that it's a more dense product as a core material than birch plywood and the lower grades of MDF. What that means is getting a really clean cut, so really easy to work with on site. And getting into the standards around this type of core material. In British Standards 4965, the durability class, it meets the durability requirements for areas exposed to running water over a prolonged period. So clearly that's not how you install the product, but there is the assurance there that it meets the standards around that. So from durability, we then move on to the strength of the product, and we talk about the strength really in how it's manufactured and what that results in terms of the surface of the MDF. And really what it delivers is a fantastically flat substrate for bonding to. So when we make multi-panel, there's the core material, you bond the face laminate to it, and you bond the backing laminate to it to balance. With plywood, despite our really exacting requirements on the quality of the plywood, it is possible that you get little kinks and surface imperfections. It's something that, because of the way that exterior MDF is manufactured, we just don't get. So with ply, there is the possibility of what's called telegraphing. So these little kinks within the plywood, if you've got a thinner laminate, particularly the thinner glossy ones, can telegraph and show through. That's eliminated with exterior grade MDF and the types of laminate that we use. And as John mentioned, from a production perspective, it's absolutely fantastic. So reduces risk of delamination, even although we have rigorous control measures in our factory around that. And the strength of it also extends, and was a really key selection criteria in choosing this core over others that we trialed, in that it allows us to maintain the integrity of the hydrolock joint, and that 6 mil tolerance for fitting over uneven surfaces, the next best on the market being 4 millimeters. Tropical plywood's one of the ones that John mentioned, simply wouldn't allow us to achieve the precision that we do with hydrolock. So that was ruled out. So yeah, there's, as you can see through this presentation, there are a lot of factors that we've considered to ensure the continuity of supply, sustainability of the product, to deliver the best products on the market and continue to do so. So that all wraps up into our quality management system. So we are ISO 9001 2015 certified, have been for coming up 40 years in the various guises of that standard. And that's met through our own internal quality management system. And that really came to the fore in testing all the different types of alternative core material that we were looking at as we made the switch last year. So we've mentioned quite a lot of them: sustainability, how close it is to home, the precision in the hydrolock joint, the density of the product for a clean cut, the formaldehyde emissions for a safe cut. So hopefully what's coming through is a really rigorous process to ensure the best product is delivered to you in multi-panel. So that wraps up the advantages section. And I think we can just now go to some questions around this section.
So Michael, there's one here around, can you say with confidence that the MDF product is more mold resistant than tiles? And I'm assuming that means the multi-panel product with the MDF core.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, that one. So thanks for that. And it's a hot topic right now, obviously. But the simple answer is yes. The high pressure laminate surface of multi-panel means there is nowhere for mold to gather, whereas with grout, clearly there is. So overall, a more hygienic solution, certainly.
And another one here, you mentioned multi-panel is durable and strong. Does this mean you can install it over old tiles?
again, certainly you can. The only check is just to ensure that the tiles are sound and not, cracking and falling off the wall. But in normal circumstances where you've got tiles well secured to the wall, yes, you can go over the top. It's a fantastic advantage of multi-panel in that multi-panel saves a huge amount of time in installation anyway, but layer on top of that, not needing to remove tiles and make good before applying the wall panel, then there's even further time savings.
Okay, last one from Mike. Does this mean you will never consider plywood even if the backdrop shifted to greater availability? I'll take that question, Michael. So with that, I think in life you can never say never. But for us, we can't see there being a change in the political situation in the short to medium term. And we feel that the product we've selected as an alternative is performing extremely well. So there's no need to go through the process, the big change back to something when we feel that we've found a product which is an equivalent. But like I say, if market economics and things all played out, and then there was an advantage to plywood over MDF, a huge advantage that would make it very difficult to not go back. But we're certainly not pining for it to come back or feel like we need it to come back because the MDF is performing as well. I think that is all the questions there, Michael.
Yep.
So probably just leaves us to kind of summarize. As we've reiterated all the way through, we feel that the product that we're producing now is equivalent to what we were producing pre-war. There's no change to the surface. The T&G performs the same. Is as waterproof when installed as the previous product. The product is actually a little bit flatter, and the product is easy to work with and has excellent screw retention. And one of the things on site, and speak from experience of doing my own bathroom, the MDF is extremely easy to work with a plane or electric plane. So if you're not very good at measuring, like I'm not, it's quite easy to work with. And that was slightly different from when we had the birch plywood in my previous bathroom. So we've gone through the questions. I think that just leaves us to really go over how we can support you and what information is available. So we have a vast library of information on our website, from information on the product, case studies, blogs. So if you want to find out more about Multipanel, please visit the website. Is your first port of call. We're very open as a sales and customer support team. We'll answer queries from our direct customers, but we're also happy to engage with our customer, answer any queries, provide information and samples. So please feel free to reach out to our team. If you're not a direct customer, please speak to your local branch, who would be happy to share the details of one of our team. And lastly, for more detailed installation information and training, please visit multipanelu.co.uk. This is a bespoke on-demand training program with installation videos and hints and tips on how to install our panels. And within 30 minutes, we'll answer probably all of your 95% of your questions on installing the panel, and it's designed so that you'll be ready to have a go at the end of the program. So it's really interesting. If you haven't been through it, please sign up to Multipanel U. We can all pick up a few hints and tricks, never go amiss. So that probably just leaves us to thank you for your time, and hope you all have a lovely weekend. But as Michael said at the start, thanks for taking the time at the end of a busy week to listen to what we've got to say. And if you have any feedback, please feel free to get in touch. We'll be sending out an email after the webinar, and we're open to any feedback on the format of the event, the content, or if there's anything that you were expecting that you didn't see. So thanks again for your time. And any final words from you, Michael?
Yeah, just one, which is just before signing off. If you wouldn't mind going back to the poll section we're going to ask a very similar question and see if we get different results. So if you're able just to pop into polls, same again, and select one of the answers, that would be great. Just a few more to come in. So perhaps a couple of people have had to leave early, but it sounds like you know that's been worthwhile, because we had 75% falling into the limited or no knowledge, and yeah, that's reversed to over 75% now having a strong understanding. So hopefully, yeah, a useful end to your Friday, and thanks again for taking the time out, and we look forward to setting up the next webinar. As John says, please ask us for what you would like to learn more about on Multipanel. But for now, thanks very much and have a nice weekend.
Thanks, everyone.